All right, guys, hello and welcome back to the show. My name is Reed Wheeler. I'm your host. Anyway, I have with me just an amazing person. So excited to interview her today, but I'll let her officially introduce herself a little bit further.
Welcome to the Honors Podcast.
Chloe, tell the people who you are.
Okay, so my name is Chloe Cox. I am a senior biochemistry major in the honors program from Kentucky. I wear a lot of hats on campus. I'm the chair of the honors program advancement committee and have been this is my second year as the chair. I've been on the committee since sophomore year. Pretty heavily involved in undergrad research in the Wannick School of Natural Sciences. I'm a university ambassador captain. Frequent intramural beach volleyball player as well.
Really? I didn't know about the volleyball.
Oh, yeah, former champion.
Really? Mm-hmm. Former champion. What was the team name?
The Dogs.
The Dogs.
Mm-hmm.
That was fun. I always love, because Honors has a September challenge we do at the beginning of the year. Those are always the funniest team names. Yeah. I was like, those are really good. Last year, it was like walking to your mom's house.
Yeah.
It was just a funny one. Wow, that's very impressive. Tell me about the program advancement committee. What do you do in that, and what is that?
Yeah, so our primary job is recruitment. So we're a little different from the other committees in that we don't necessarily have like a lot of events throughout the year for our current students, but we play a pretty significant role in like helping with, open house tabling. Presidential scholars is kind of like our biggest thing because 50% of the kids who come for Presidential Scholars Weekend commit to High Point, and a good percentage of those kids that's kind of our target audience. So we have a couple years ago we started like organizing an event in Finch on the Saturday that all those kids are here, so they can kind of just see what the vibes are in there, check out some rooms. And kind of just meet some current scholars, that sort of thing. We also do the info session with Dr. Hedman. I've done that for the last 3 years now. But yeah, so the recruitment events like open houses, presidential scholars, sometimes we go to orientation. But then also if any students, there's a page on the honors website that's contact an honors scholar. All of those go to Dr. Hedman. He then sends them to me, so then connecting current scholars or prospective students with current students who have similar interests, just so we can kind of make those connections and actually let people know who we are.
Wow, so you really care about the honors program and what it does.
Yeah.
And really been working with Dr. Hedman, our director, very closely for a long time.
Yeah.
Do you remember when you first met him and your first impression of him?
Yeah, so actually the first time I met him was at one of those info sessions at my Presidential Scholars Weekend as a high school senior. And it was, the timeline for admissions was a little bit different back then. So it was mid-February, and I had already been admitted to the honors program, but I hadn't committed yet. But I went to that session, and I remember this so vividly. I was sitting there with my mom, and we just kept elbowing each other throughout the whole thing, because everything that Dr. Hedman and the current student who was with him at the time were saying was oh my gosh, this sounds exactly like me. This is the place where I need to be. And it was during that session that I logged onto my portal, accepted my spot in the program, and then I went up to him after it was over and was hey, you just I'm your newest committed honor student. So yeah, that was the first time I met him.
Oh, that's so cute. So why did you apply to the honors program in the first place? We're working our ways backwards a little bit.
Yeah.
So senior year in high school, how about let's start first with what brought you to High Point, first of all. Mm-hmm. And then I imagine you're probably looking at natural science fellows and then honors as well. Tell me about that journey.
Yeah. So I knew that I wanted to go out of state for school, but I really didn't know where. So I applied to a bunch of different places all over the place, in the Midwest, in the Northeast, a couple places in North Carolina. And I got to probably November of my senior year and was let me find one or two more. And so I went back through my email inbox, and had a ton of emails from my admissions counselor here. And I'd never heard of High Point before because there's not like a huge population of people from Kentucky here. So like certainly not from where I'm from. So I was like, oh, this place seems interesting. So I Googled it, obviously saw all the pictures and stuff and was like, wow, this place is gorgeous. And I had a free application code. So I was like, okay, what's the harm in applying? And that was also, that was like fall 2020. So a lot of places were still closed, like campuses were still closed for tours and things like that, but High Point was open. So I applied in like late December and then came in like mid-January for a tour. And it was one of those things where like when I stepped onto campus, I was like, okay, this feels right. This feels like home. And so the feel was there, but also things like the honors program just like on paper had kind of appealed to me because it seemed different than anywhere else I had looked. But I'll talk about that more in a second. The access to research as an undergrad, that was also going to be important for me. And then like the small class sizes, so you actually have the opportunity to like develop connections with your professors and things like that. That was going to be really important for me. Plus also just the campus as a whole. So that was kind of why High Point. And then when it came to deciding between honors and fellows, the big thing there was that I always kind of leaned towards honors. I think just because the curriculum sounded really cool to me and like having these classes that are project-based and discussion-based and you get to like dive pretty deeply into all of these disciplines as opposed to taking like intro to psychology and pre-calculus and like some kind of surface level history class. Like I wanted to kind of just jump in the deep end with all of these things, and that seemed like that was going to be the case with the honors classes. The interdisciplinary piece of it also seemed really cool, and then like I don't know, it just always sounded more appealing to me. And I think I knew something that I always tell prospective students if they're trying to decide between like honors and specifically natural sciences fellows, because that's the one I can speak to the most, is that if you know like this is what I want to do, I know that I want to be a doctor and I want to spend the next 4 years like professionalizing myself as much as I can to be a doctor, then that's a good fellows kid. But if you're someone who is like, okay, maybe I want to be a doctor or like I want to do something in the sciences, but I also really still like history or art or like some of these other things, or I'm still really curious about a lot of things outside of science, or like I don't want to spend all my time doing science, then that's an honors kid, and that was me. So it was really kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah. Why? So like you're a biochemistry major. Did you know that as well senior year of high school applying?
So I actually started as a neuroscience major very briefly because I really liked chemistry in high school, but I also really liked psychology. And so I thought, oh, this is going to be a good way to kind of combine those things, like get the science and you get the psychology. But I changed to biochemistry. It was at some point during my first semester here, because I realized I wasn't going to get as much chemistry as I wanted with neuroscience. So I switched to biochem and then picked up a psych minor instead.
You still have that psych minor?
I officially still do, but I'm not going to finish it because there were other like upper level biochem and chem classes that I wanted to take instead. So the interest was still there. I just didn't have the time to do all the things. So yeah.
Oh yeah. There you go. All right. Looking back, who were you before coming to High Point? What was high school, middle school, Chloe? What was growing up in Kentucky like? Because you don't meet too many people from Kentucky here.
So I'm from a really small town, and they're like, nothing I'm about to say is like bashing any of this. This is just kind of like how it was. Like my high school I guess really just the school district generally, but the high school especially spent a lot of time, and there were a lot of resources dedicated to preparing students for like trade school and vocations and stuff like that after high school. And there were, things that emphasized college, but it was very apparent that was not like the thing that most students were going to go do, was to go to college after. Like my high school had, like they had this building we called the VOTEC. It was like the vocational and technical school, and it was like separate from the main building, but they had like classes for like welding and automotive stuff, and like there was machining, carpentry, like all of those kinds of like trades. And so a lot of students spent time during the day over there working on those kinds of things, taking like machining and welding classes and whatever, which is really cool, and it was a really great opportunity for all of those kids, but that wasn't necessarily where I was at. So it took me a long time actually to figure out that I liked science, because there wasn't a huge emphasis on that. A lot of those classes, like science and math and, English, like those kind of core classes, it was just like, get these students through the basics, teach them what they need to know. But there wasn't a lot of interest outside of that with my classmates and with a lot of my teachers too. But then my junior year, I took chemistry for the first time and was like, oh my gosh, wow, I really like this a lot. Like this seems like something that I could actually do. Because I always knew that I was going to go to college, but there was a lot of bouncing around about like what I was actually going to study, because I liked school. I liked pretty much all the classes that I took, but there wasn't any one thing that I was like, oh, I'm super passionate about this, until I took chemistry, and then I was like, okay, like this science is where I need to go. So that kind of came later. I took one of the other like pathways you could do at my high school was there was like a family and consumer sciences one, and a culinary pathway. So I took a lot of cooking classes in high school, and actually took a couple college culinary classes. So those are the two classes that I didn't get credit for when I transferred them all to High Point, which is fine. There's not exactly an equivalent of that here, but yeah.
I mean, you're the student instructor for
for food chem, yeah.
Yeah.
So that, I guess those skills eventually came back in handy, but yeah. So I don't know. It was a different time.
Were you so I imagine this was like a rural, suburban area?
Very rural.
Were you kind of in a woodsy area?
We lived across the street from like a cornfield. My house we were on like 3.5 acres, so we had some space that was like lined with trees, but then across the street, I mean, some years it was a cornfield, some years it was soybeans, but we were on a very we had neighbors, but we were very much not in a neighborhood.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how most of it was.
So like, what did you do as a kid playing? Did you go run in the cornfield? What's that movie, Interstellar?
Yeah. Not quite like that, but there was a creek kind of nearby, so like sometimes we would go down to the creek and like take walks down there and just kind of hang out. But I also played volleyball for years growing up, so that was kind of how I spent most of my free time, was like in the gym or whatever, playing volleyball. Because I played basketball and volleyball in middle school, and then just volleyball when I got to high school, and then I started playing travel ball too. So that was like a year-round thing. Yeah. It was just all volleyball all the time. But when we weren't, lots of campfires, lots of like nights just kind of out under the stars, I guess, and things like that. So
that's very poetic. What about books, movies, or TV shows? Did any of that stuff define you? Because I know you love watching a good TV show.
I do,
these
yeah.
days.
Supernatural was my favorite. Well, there were a few. Criminal Minds, that was one. Supernatural was another. I tried to get into this surprises a lot of people. I tried to get into I can't even think of the name. That's how little I was invested in it. No, I didn't watch Grey's Anatomy. Breaking Bad.
Oh.
Like that was always
seen that either.
That was one where people were always like, "Oh, like it's the guys like
chemistry."
Chemistry, like you should," but I never got into it. Supernatural was a favorite though, like the Vampire Diaries and like those shows. So big Netflix binger for sure.
Oh yeah.
I like to read too and things like that, but
it's about the TV shows.
Well, when I have time.
Yeah. Did you have any childhood books that you really think you loved and maybe influenced who you are?
I don't know if I can say that these like totally influenced who I am, but I was a big fan of the Hunger Games books. So
I feel
as
that
those
has
are like
influenced
coming,
you.
as those like new ones are coming out now, I'm like, oh, I actually just read the brand new one a couple weeks ago.
You recommend?
Definitely recommend.
Okay.
Very good. But I also was a super fan of the Percy Jackson series, the like Greek mythology, and I was so into that. I was actually one of the main female character, Annabeth. I dressed up as her for Halloween one year. And nobody knew who I was, but it was fine. I didn't care because she was like my favorite. So I guess maybe I kind of, I don't know, like related to her a little bit because she was like daughter of, this is going to be me totally nerding out over this, but she was like daughter of Athena, and she was like the smart girl, but she was blonde, and so she like kind of had to deal with that like stereotype or whatever, and I was like, oh yeah, I totally resonate with this, like this is so me. So those books, that was definitely a big part of my childhood for sure.
Have you ever talked to Taylor Galavati about this?
We actually have not talked about this.
Because she also loved Percy Jackson series. She's also from Kentucky, and she
Yeah.
also dressed up as a Percy Jackson character for Halloween.
Oh, we're going to have to talk about this. Yeah, so Taylor and I actually went to the same summer camp for a few years growing up.
Oh my gosh.
So we knew each other before we came here. But we did not, like, we made this decision to be, like, to come to High Point and to do honors, like, totally independently of each other.
Yeah.
But we knew each other we met the summer of 2016, I guess, at this summer camp. So, no, we have not talked about Percy Jackson, but I guess we'll have to now.
Yeah, because we talked about that on her episode too, and I was like, yeah, everyone from your grade, it was always Percy Jackson. Like, that was your year's book. It was so interesting. Oh, this is a side plot, but do you know the etymology of your last name, Cox?
I used to, but I don't anymore.
You don't? That's too bad. It's a good name. You have a good stage name, I will say. Chloe Cox. Like, that's marketable. Like, you can go places with that.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Well, it's good. It's probably why you got into your grad school. It's like, oh, that's a good name,
Oh,
Chloe
yeah,
Cox.
probably.
It's not about your research or anything. It's just a good name. Okay. Okay. So freshman year of HPU, you're in the honors program. You were in a class called Colloquium, Humanistic Inquiry. It's called many different things. And y'all did something called the Honors Challenge.
Yeah.
I've been given access
Oh, no.
to the photo archive. So we're going to share a little fun with you. Let's see. Oh, that one's funny. So meet your professor challenge.
Yeah.
So for this week, this is what Chloe said. For this week's challenge, I introduced myself to my chemistry lab professor, Dr. Fogarty. We had a conversation about my major, mostly centered around the idea that I was crazy for picking neuroscience and should immediately switch to biochemistry. After we talked for a few minutes, I told him about my parentheses slight ulterior motives for a conversation and that I needed an awesome picture to win some cool swag. So he, in true Fogarty form, stuck a glove on his head and said, "If this doesn't win your challenge, I don't know what will." Did you end up winning that challenge?
Okay, no, I did not. We got there, so like that next week when we showed up, yeah, there it is. So we did not win, and I was super bitter about it. And I told Dr. Fogarty, I was like, we didn't win somehow. And he was like, that's crazy. So he emailed Dr. Hedman, and like he emailed me and Dr. Hedman and was like, this is rigged. Like, there's not, like, I almost died. I risked my life for this. Like, totally. I mean, it was all in good fun. But he was like, this is ridiculous. And I, of course, was mortified because this was like the second week of that semester. Like, this was an early challenge.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really know Dr. Hedman or Fogarty like that yet. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. But then Dr. Hedman responded and was like, my sincerest apologies for this. I will right this egregious wrong. And so he had me like show up to his office, and he gave me, I think I got a hat after that because he was like, I feel terrible about this. Like, let me fix this. So I eventually got some cool swag for it, but
Dang, that's some, I don't know, what even is that? It's not nepotism, it's just Fogarty.
yeah.
It was great. Did you ever have a class with him? It was just like a lab professor?
Well, I had him first semester I had him for Gen Chem 1 lab, and then because he taught the majors lecture for Gen Chem. So I didn't have him that first semester because I was a neuro major and not a biochem major. But then when I switched to biochemistry, I then had him for lecture and lab for Gen Chem in the spring. And then I had him again junior year in the fall for an analytical chemistry class.
Yeah.
So I've had him a couple of times now.
Yeah. And then does he still teach one of the honors classes?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, he teaches
cool.
color and light.
Like, for anyone who doesn't know Dr. Fogarty, like, he's a personality.
He is a big personality, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, he'll put a glove on his head.
Yeah,
And
just
it's fun.
they're fun.
It's so fun. Okay. So, you say you're an honors person, but why are you an honors person? You're elbowing your mom at that president thing. You're like, oh my gosh, this is me. Like, how did you know that's who you were?
I think there was just a lot of conversation about, or like we kept hearing about, like if you are a student who is just, I think the phrasing that Dr. Hedman used was like, maybe you know what you want to do, but you're like mad that you have to choose one thing. Like that seems to be an honors kid. And at the time, I was not quite as into the science as I am now, because, I was still new to it at that point. I was like, oh my gosh, that's so me. Like how am I supposed to choose one thing when I like all of these different things? And like, how am I supposed to just pick this one thing and whatever? And I was really into the idea of these classes where you were like, it wasn't just here, like for math, like it wasn't just here's one problem, show me the steps, how do you get from point A to point B? And there's one way to get from point A to point B. Otherwise, it's wrong. I wanted to be in a math class where it was like, okay, here's a problem. There could be 18 different ways to get from point A to point B. And as long as you can, tell me your thought process in getting there, like that's, that can be a right answer. Or, so that's my favorite example for that. But just really being curious about a lot of different things, and thinking, like, I want to know how to do all of it. Like, I don't want to just spend the next 4 years focusing on the science and the science only. I want to also be really into and, like, be really involved with, all these other disciplines and doing all of these other things and meeting with and interacting with people who are also like that. Because I adore the other biochemistry majors, and we've spent a lot of time together over the last 4 years at this point. But, like, the honors, the friends that I have in the honors program are, like, my people, because it's all people who are, like, we know about and we want to talk about a bunch of different things, and it's not just, focus isn't just science all the time. It's everything in the world and how the world works and, being curious about things and all this other stuff, so...
How has that influenced or guided you in your biochemistry journey? And then as you got really into it and have been doing all this really cool, amazing research that you're going to conferences for, and then you're going to like kind of continue on a different tangent in grad school.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your biochemistry.
I think honors plays into that in a couple of different ways. Sometimes it's just like a nice break. Like I get to kind of use the other side of my brain a little bit and like think about things in a different way. So that's one. That's like the easy answer. But I think it has also, because I've taken these classes where I've had to think about things and reflect on things in ways that I maybe hadn't before, or, I always go back to the math of democracy, that math class example, but like thinking mathematically as opposed to just doing math, and like that applied to all these other disciplines. Or like thinking about, so that's where we'll go. And I think having those classes and being surrounded by these people where I am thinking about things from perspectives other than just a biochemist or a scientist, I think helps me kind of in terms of like project planning or like experiment planning or thinking about, what direction to go from here. I think having that broader perspective coming in kind of helps me see things a little more broadly and not get like too narrow too quickly, which can be really important, in research and that kind of thing, like keeping the big picture in mind.
Do you feel other scientists do that well? Keep the big picture in mind when focusing on really narrow things?
I think that's something that you learn with time. And so I think a lot of really, successful scientists and researchers, I think they get to a point where they are able to do that and keep the big picture in mind and not just, focus too narrowly on something. But I think at this stage, at the undergraduate level and probably, I would assume going into grad school too, it takes time to kind of build that skill. And I think the honors curriculum and having to think about things in the way that I have over the last few years has kind of helped me get there a little bit quicker.
Yeah.
Maybe, which has definitely been helpful.
I mean, from an outside perspective, you were definitely a really great communicator. And I've heard you explain your research to me, like someone who doesn't know all the scientific terms and all the research methods you're using, but it makes sense to me because you always bring in the bigger picture of this is why it's useful, this is the potential application of all this stuff.
Yeah.
Which all the listeners are probably what the heck does she research? What is going on? So I'm giving you permission to nerd out a little bit and tell us about stuff.
Yeah, so I am in an antibiotic resistance lab. I joined Dr. Megan Blackledge's lab in October of my freshman year.
Wow,
so pretty
that's
early on. So the goal of our research is not to develop new antibiotics, which I think is what a lot of people think. The approach that we take to antibiotic resistance instead is to identify and develop antibiotic adjuvants, which an adjuvant is something that is a compound that works to target bacterial resistance mechanisms as opposed to just killing the bacteria outright. So the idea there is that it's harder for bacteria to develop resistance to something that isn't directly trying to kill it. Mm-hmm. So you couple an antibiotic adjuvant with maybe an existing antibiotic that doesn't really work anymore. And so the adjuvant goes in and kind of if this is my favorite analogy to use with this. So if bacterial resistance is like a shield protecting the cell, the antibiotic just kind of bounces off, can't get past the shield. The adjuvant's job is to kind of put a crack in that shield so that the antibiotic can kind of sneak past the defenses and get back into the cell and do what it was always supposed to do. So that very broadly is what we're interested in. And when I joined the lab, we were in MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staph aureus. And my job was to develop, because we had some people who were doing organic synthesis and making these adjuvant compounds and derivatives. We had some people doing a lot of bio testing and screening them for activity. Some people in Dr. Heather Miller's lab doing RNA biochemistry work, figuring out mechanism of action of these compounds and things like that. But we hadn't tested anything in vivo yet, so in a living animal. And so that was my job, was to set up an animal infection model to screen these things, to do some more screening that wasn't just in a petri dish. And so I set up a C. elegans infection model. Those are little baby nematode roundworms. When I say little baby, they get to be a millimeter in length, so very tiny. But that was my job to set that up and see if any of these compounds worked when we actually put them into a living organism. And so I worked on that for 2.5 years-ish or so. So did a lot of really cool stuff there.
Wait, pause.
Yes.
With the worms, are you putting the bacteria in the worms first and then putting the advent also, or you're just doing the advent to see if it kills their cells?
So their normal food source is bacteria. So it's this strain of E. coli is what we fed them normally. And that's just that's what they live on. So when I would do these experiments, we would infect them with, we did it in a liquid culture, so they just kind of swam around in it. But we would put the bacteria in there, so the MRSA, whatever it was. And so the idea is that they would just swim around in the media and eat the bacteria. But then we also treated with different combinations of antibiotic plus or minus the adjuvant as well. Mm-hmm. So then we just compare, if they have, if they're infected with this bacteria and then treated with this antibiotic, this is how their survival looks over the course of 7 days. Then we compare that to if we infect them and then just treat with the adjuvant, how does their survival look? If we then treat with adjuvant and antibiotic, how does that then compare? So I had to, I would start the experiment by infecting and treating all of them, and then I would have to go in at the same time every day for the next 7 days and track and count how many were alive and how many were dead. So it was tedious. And it was definitely a very involved project because I was going into the lab
Yeah.
every single day. But it was really cool. And we got some really interesting stuff from that. And that project is actually, that's what I was published on for the first time. So I became a published author on my 21st birthday is the day that it was published. So that's kind of my fun little fact.
Some fun
about
anecdotes
that.
for you.
But yeah, so now I work on a different project. I started this over this summer where we wanted to see, because historically the lab had really always been in staph, in this one kind of bacteria. But my project, just because we were curious to see if this worked, if any of our compounds that were active in staph were also active in these other kinds of bacteria that are objectively a little more difficult to treat than staph. And it turns out that some of those worked really, really well, and a lot of them actually work better in this new bacteria than they did in staph, which is very exciting. So that's kind of where I've been living for the last 8 or 9 months at this point. And so that's my project now. I wrote a grant proposal on it in the fall. I'm actually staying for a few weeks after graduation to kind of wrap some things up with that. So yeah.
Who do you write a grant proposal to?
Well, the one that I did was, it was a graduate research fellowship. So it was a proposal to get like funding in grad school. So that was like kind of a separate thing. But now my two kind of PIs, Dr. Blackledge and Dr. Miller, they're writing the grant renewals or new grants on this. One is, I think, due in June. The other one's due in October. And this is now kind of the main thing that they're writing about in these grants. Is the new bacteria that we're in is A. baumannii. So they're kind of focusing on those things now because we're getting some really, really interesting data here. So a lot of like my preliminary data is going into those grants, and they're writing, I don't know if these are NIH or NSF proposals, but
Those are an example of organizations grant proposals will go to.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I took my like honors sciencey lab class, potions and poisons, like the semester paper you have to write, mine took the form of basically a grant proposal where I did basically a writ review of acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter. And I was like, here's all the research we've done on it. Here's what we know about it. Here's some potential research we should do in a very like honors way. I was like, we need to do research on meditation and acetylcholine.
Yeah.
And Dr. Lynn was like, this is great. This reads like a really well-written grant proposal. And I ended up going to conference for it. So,
Right, yeah, you did.
Yeah, so that was very
cool.
fun. Did you present any of this research at any conferences around the country?
Oh, so many.
Yes. I was talking to your LinkedIn earlier. It's just like, I'd like to share my conference post. Here's my conference post. Here's my conference post.
Yeah, so I have presented at 5 American Chemical Society conferences now since sophomore year. 2 of them were regional. Well, let me just go in order. So the first one I did was spring of 2023. Yeah, spring of 2023. So that was my sophomore year in Indianapolis. That was a national meeting. And I did a poster presentation. And then fall 2023, there was a regional conference in Durham. Spring 2024, national conference in New Orleans. Fall 2024, regional conference in Atlanta. And then most recently, spring 2025, we just got back from San Diego a couple weeks ago at this point. And that was the first time that I gave a talk instead of doing a poster. So like moving up in the world.
Wow.
But, yeah,
That's very cool. What have you learned from doing these conferences, experiences of meeting and talking with people who don't know what you've been doing and like don't know about High Point?
Yeah.
And like, especially when you were like a sophomore, like,
Yeah.
oh.
I think it's always fun because High Point brings as many or more undergrads than most of the other schools that are represented at these things. Like we just bring a ton of undergrads compared to most other places in the country, which is, I think, always really exciting. But I think some things that I've picked up on over the years is just that, first of all, it's interesting to see what other people are doing kind of outside of like this bubble of High Point research, to see like, this is what's going on in the field, this is what's going on in all of these other disciplines that I maybe have never even heard of, let alone like heard of any research in that area. But it's also just been a really good opportunity to learn how to communicate science to people who have no idea what you're talking about. because they, certainly know about antibiotic resistance, but they may not know anything about adjuvants, and they may not know anything about, these compounds or these assays that we're doing. So being able to explain, and articulate, this is the work that I've actually done, there's definitely a learning curve there, but it's been a really cool thing a really cool skill to kind of develop over the last few years and be like, yeah, these are all the things that I've done. Because especially when you are presenting a poster and it's really just can be a couple years of work that's just boiled down to a couple of graphs on a poster. Sometimes that's kind of sometimes that can be kind of sad to look at. All that time that I spent, it's just these 2 graphs. This is what I have.
Yeah. And most people don't even read it. They just ask you, be like,
yeah,
what did you do?
Yeah. So being able to kind of articulate, this is everything that went into kind of developing these couple of graphs, I think is rewarding. And it's always fun to see other people invested and interested in the stuff that you're doing too. So that's cool. And they've been really good experiences for sure.
What does it take to be a good researcher?
Oh, man. I was actually just talking to somebody about this the other day. I think you have to be at least a little bit crazy to want to do it.
That's what Dr. Cochin told me.
Because, hang on. I think you have to be at least a little bit crazy to want to do it, a little bit of a masochist, because there are so many days. I mean, I've gotten kind of lucky, and the projects that I have worked on have overall worked pretty well.
You've had results.
Yeah, I've gotten results pretty quickly. We got lucky in the sense that this thing that I tried worked. But for most people, most of the time, what you're doing is not working. And so you have to have enough grit and determination. You have to care about what you're doing enough to be okay, I know that I'm probably going to there's a good chance that I'm going to go spend several hours in the lab today, and there's a good chance that none of it works, which is kind of sad. But it's, being able to kind of push through that and work until you are able to find the answers to the questions that you're asking. Because when you do find those answers, it's really, really rewarding. And it's a really good feeling to be yes, this thing worked. And now I have this answer to this question I was asking, and now I'm contributing new knowledge to this field. This is something, there was a moment I had over the summer where I got this really, really exciting result. And I was actually the only person in the lab, because it was a Sunday morning, Saturday or Sunday morning, that I was just going in and reading something. And I was I'm the only person in the world right now who knows about this. And that's just a really cool feeling. And so I think being passionate about it, you have to love what you're doing, or else it's going to be a miserable experience. But I also think kind of what I was talking about earlier, and being able to keep the big picture in mind and not just narrowing down, focusing too much on this, or putting too much pressure on this one thing or this one experiment, because if it doesn't work, then it's oh, well, what am I doing? But part of that is also keeping in mind that if you are able to think about the big picture and you try 3 things that don't work, then okay, that it's not, the answer to this question is not any of these 3 things. So it's still good information to know. It's just not as good as knowing what doesn't work is not as fun as knowing what works.
Yeah.
But just kind of being able to keep that in perspective and thinking about those things, those are all really important. But yeah.
That's a good philosophy to apply outside the lab too.
Yeah.
That's a good life philosophy as well. Do you find yourself kind of applying that in other areas of your life?
I try. Some things it's easier
Yeah.
than others, but yeah, I try.
So what's next for you, Chloe Cox?
That's a great question. So I am going to grad school.
Yay.
I want to get my PhD. I'm going to the University of Minnesota, their PhD program in medicinal chemistry, which is one of the best programs for medicinal chemistry in the country. So I'm really, really excited about it. I spent so much time this whole year, because in the fall I was applying to places. I applied to 10 schools because I was there's so many places I could go. How do I narrow all of this down? And there's so many faculty who are doing such cool research at all these places. And so I applied to a bunch of schools. And then this semester I spent a lot of time traveling for interviews and visit weekends and stuff like that. So it's been pretty busy, but I'm going to Minnesota.
Yeah. And what do you know what specifically you're going to be doing in the program? It's like you've been telling me about this before. You do research sometimes, or it's like classes and stuff, and you just learn about medicinal chemistry?
Yeah, so the way it'll work is it's a rotation program. So when I get there in August, a couple weeks, start date is fuzzy on that, but when these actually start. But I'll rotate in the fall through 3 different labs in the department for like 4 to 5 weeks each, and kind of figuring out, and through that process, figuring out like who my advisor is going to be for the rest of the program. So during those rotations, I'll do those, I'll pick one, and then starting in the spring, from that point on, that'll be like the lab that I do my thesis research in. So that the research starts pretty early, but also the first like year and a half, 2 years, I'll be taking classes, a couple a semester, all like medicinal chemistry focused, whether it's organic chemistry or biochemistry, like biological assay design, things like that. But yeah, so classes just for the first couple of years. The research will kind of be happening at that same time, but then after the classes are done, then it's really just research until I've done enough to defend a thesis and graduate.
Oh, so it's not like a set amount of time. It's just until you get your thesis
Just
together?
until you're done. Yeah, so
Wow.
it could be 4.5 years. It could be 6 years. I think
What
the
are
average...
you hoping for?
5 would be good. I think the average is like 5.5
Yeah.
right now for their department, average time to graduation. So, which would also be fine, but we'll see.
So do you have like a career that you want to do? You just want to do chemistry research, or like is there a job in mind after the PhD that you want?
Potentially. I think my decision right now, well, I'm not making this decision yet, but like thinking down the road, like I could stay in academia and like get a job at a university somewhere and kind of research as an academic, or industry is kind of the other big option. And so that's hopefully something, because I mean, I've only been in academia. I don't really know like the ins and outs of industry and what that would look like yet. So that's hopefully something that I'm going to be able to figure out in the next, couple of years. But I do know like Minnesota is good. They send a lot of people to industry. But they also have like opportunities to do internships like in industry and that kind of thing. So it's possible that like I get to do an internship with some company and figure out like, okay, this is something that I would like to do, or this is definitely not anything that I want to do. So that's for the next few years to kind of figure that out. But eventually like drug discovery and infectious disease research somewhere.
That's very cool. Is there anything you have like a dream about finding the cure for or something?
Well, I mean, after the last like 3.5 years, I have gotten super invested in this whole antibiotic resistance.
Yeah, because like what's like the one thing like we're gonna be killed by bacteria by 2050 or something?
It's projected that by 2050, you'd be more likely to die from a resistant bacterial infection than cancer.
Yeah.
So super comforting thought there. But yeah, so that's kind of, I'm very invested in that at this point. And there are several people at Minnesota who do research kind of in that vein. So it's possible that I spend the next few years also doing that there, just in a slightly different, just on a different avenue. But I don't know. I think just like infectious disease generally, somewhere in there is kind of where I want to be.
Yeah.
So who knows?
That's really cool.
We'll see.
Well, I have no doubt you're passionate about it. So you're sufficing that. Well, thank you so much for coming today. I do have one more question for you, because I have a tradition on the podcast where the last guest has left you a question to answer.
Okay.
And then you will leave a question for the next guest as well.
Okay.
And this is a good question for you.
Okay.
What will you know? Wait, no. Scratch that. How will you know when you've made it? And when they wrote this, I was like, "Damn, this is gonna be good for Chloe," because I don't tell them who the next guest is either. So it's just.
Oh man, that is a good question. Can I ask you asked it?
I've never
Tell
told
me
anyone
later.
else who's asked it. I'll tell you after you answer it.
Okay. Man, I think I've got a couple different. Oh, there's a couple things that are going to go into this. I think one is that I am running my own lab somewhere, whether it's in academia or whether it's in industry, like being the PI of my own group, and like I have, grant funding to be able to answer the questions that I want to answer. So I think that's part of it, like for work, being a PI. But I also think being in a place in my life outside of the lab where I'm able to, I guess, financially stable enough that I can like travel and still like see the world and do those kinds of things. Because that's something else that I, have tried to do during my time here, and like as I've gotten older and started to have my own money and be like, okay, these are the places I want to go, the things I want to do. So I think being able to balance, that will really be when I've made it. When I can balance like traveling and kind of continuing to see the world, but also like having my own group, and it's in a place where I could leave for a little bit and it will still continue to run. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's a hard question.
That's a good answer.
I think, okay.
Yeah, that's good. You feel satisfied with that?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's what I do.
I'll pass this over to you. It was Shulak.
Okay.
Unless you asked it. You can kind of see some examples of previous questions and then ignore the other stuff. It's also my notebook.
Okay.
And then write down absolutely anything. And then date it and first and last initial.
Okay.